I'd like to talk about one of many double standards that unfortunately exists within sexual dynamics. We've always been made aware of the fact that there are certain standards that apply to men for which a variation, whether that variation is diluted or expanded, is equally and sometimes disproportionately applied to women. There are many of those. Sometimes they benefit men, and other times they are to the benefit of women. One of such double standards has to do with exclusivity. The word exclusivity has become more of a much debated, spirited, or calm, but it's become a much more debated topic within sexual dynamics. Exclusivity deals with both emotional exclusivity and physical exclusivity. The word body count applies to this word as a way of keeping score. Men, by nature, we are logical. We are cost-benefit calculators. We process things through our logic rather than our feelings. We like to see things rather than in the abstract, but to see them concretely. So the physical is, and a number is something that we relate to as men. A man's body count primarily applies to the number of people he has had sexual relations with, not the number of people he has been emotionally intimate with, but physically. But we delineate the physical experience down to sex. Similarly, a woman's body count is delineated down to a number, the number of men she has had sex with. Now, in this regard, I'm referring to heterosexual couples and heterosexual relationships where either party is exclusively heterosexual. A man's body count does not carry the same weight as a female or a woman's body count. And there are so many reasons. But let me begin with the woman's perspective first. And let me address perhaps a number of issues and make a number of recommendations. I believe in a fair society. I believe in a fair game. I believe in equality. Equality of opportunity. I believe in equality under the law. Equality in rights. I believe in a system where the same chips are available to all players, irrespective of whatever disposition you might have, whether that be the melanin content of your skin, your gender, your ethnicity or race, your preferences, sexual or otherwise. I do not believe in equality of results or equality of outcomes. I think such a pursuit is absurd. But generally speaking, I believe the rules of the games are the rules. I believe it's important to understand the rules and the boundaries within which the rule or the rules apply, and therefore to play the game to the best that you can, recognizing that the choices you make in playing such a game will have costs, it will have consequences, it will have constraints. and most importantly, will come with trade-offs. And with that overarching statement, here are the rules. In the dating marketplace, the expectation with relation to exclusivity is not consistent, and it's not the same as in the marriage marketplace or the relationship marriage place, or what I call the cohabitation partnership marketplace. Two different rules. As a social construct and also as a biological requirement, exclusivity is expected of a woman for a number of reasons. If we go back to the very primal nature of a man and our instincts, although we have evolved over thousands and thousands of years, the one thing we haven't been able to do is rewrite what we have as a script in our subconscious mind or in our primal nature. It has been only in the last century that men and women were gifted with the technology through which one could determine the paternity of a child. But prior to that, one way of establishing paternity was through sexual exclusivity and sexual discipline. So a virgin was necessary because most men, because we are cost-benefit calculators, we were very distrusting of a woman who was sexually active and promiscuous. The reason being is if she had a child, there was no way of ascertaining if the child was ours. And if we brought into our home another child that belonged to a different man, then we would be transferring our wealth to another person's offspring, and we will be providing provision and protection for someone that is not our original and legal heir. Fundamentally, exclusivity was the way to ensure paternity, to ensure that the offspring was ours. Therefore, there was in society, there was social and societal norms that constrained certain behaviors. Men were encouraged to have chastity and to be modest in their sexual exploits. And women were encouraged to be chivalrous, to have chastity, and to be aware that their value was intrinsically linked to their purity and their exclusivity. And that worked for many, many, many years. In the 1960s, there was a change, and this change had started by a number of people. The suffragette movement in the UK began the initial fork in social mores and sexual mores and social decorum and sexual decorum. We found from the 60s that there was an even playing field introduced where men and women were expected to play to the same set of rules. Now, prior to this, men deviated from what we call enforced monogamy, where the society or the community expects good behavior from you, the man, and so men went astray. A minority of men were responsible for most of the actions. The feminist movement, as part of trying to even the playing field, decided to decentralize the sexual marketplace. And the consequence of that was the women started to behave very poorly as men. It became a race to the bottom. Who can behave more badly? Technologies were introduced, like the pill, the ability to detect paternity, which made sexual encounters more prevalent. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with body count and sexual exclusivity? Well, it has everything to do with sexual exclusivity. There was a social and a cultural and a societal change, especially in the West, where it didn't matter whether you still had purity as a woman, and it didn't matter whether you had what it took to attract purity as a man. The ability to provide, the ability to protect, the ability to having the right character, having the right family background, demonstrating your ability to be responsible. The sexual marketplace was deregulated, and the consequence was that everyone was free. It was a battleground. And in a battleground, there's one activity that takes place, and that activity is called war. Sex became a commodity. And, like we say, that all is fair in love and war. Men pursued sex because it was something they needed, and women pursued sex because it was something they wanted. But there was something happening behind the scenes. Choices, constraints, costs, consequences, and trade-offs. In the dating marketplace, we fast forward to the present. In the dating marketplace, men primarily simply want sex. We will mate with the most attractive women and the least attractive women who is willing to give us sex. In exchange, we want to offer the least amount of money possible, the least amount of time possible, resources. We want to transfer as little as possible from ourselves to the woman. It's meant to be an exchange, but it's meant to be a zero-sum exchange. Sometimes a zero-sum game. If we get the most amount of sex as a man, and we give up the least amount of resources, we win. Now remember, I don't ask you to like this, but I would hope that you learn from it. As a woman, the women played a different game. A game that was opposite, with the same set of rules, but opposite to what men played. Women wanted the most amount of resources, money, influence, or access to influence, promises, wealth, in exchange for the least amount of her physical body or emotions. Women were judged, therefore, by the quality and the caliber of men that she could attract. The key word was attraction. Men were judged by and noted that the women they were able to attract was always based on the amount of money they had, and therefore the quality and the level of beauty that they could afford. Whenever you get both sets of equations in synergy, you have what is called an equilibrium, where both parties meet. In any case, to get to that point, everyone is in the sexual marketplace. Like most marketplaces, you're trading and you're battering. You're exchanging and you're receiving. Now, because in the dating marketplace men want sex, sex is the commodity. The technologies that have since evolved since the 1960s has created so much more. Social media, online dating. Such opportunities have caused the behaviors of men to dwindle to the lowest common denominator. Today, we expect from a woman sex before dates, before we court you, and certainly before marriage. Now, some of us even want you to reproduce for us before marriage. The highest price we paid previously was the price of commitment in exchange for your hand in marriage. Today, because most women are happy to behave just like men, a woman's body, a woman's womb, a woman's emotions are being offered on the platter for nothing. Therefore, I should rephrase that, for a swipe. And therefore, men will accept anything. And remember, I said that men will date the most attractive women that they can attract or that they can afford, and the least attractive women that they can afford. Doesn't matter to men. Our body count doesn't matter because we are judged on the ability to get sex. And the attributes that it requires, or that is required of a man to be in a position to negotiate, would be the same as if you were working for a company. If I walked into a marketplace and I was trying to negotiate with the seller, I have to exchange something with the seller. The currency of exchange will vary in relationships. The currency of exchange in a trade agreement is known. In sexual dynamics, that exchange could be words, my character, could be wealth, could be power or the perception of power. It could be influence. There are so many things that I can bring to the table. It could be competence, intelligence, conscientiousness. It could be being dutiful. All of those qualities I bring to the table, hoping that in combination with other values and attributes, I can exchange what I believe I have on the table for what the woman has between her legs. The interesting part is that in order to have items on the table, none of those items are given to me freely. Certainly there are people who are born into wealth, fame and money, but in the majority, most men have to go out to the world and make something of themselves. We start with discipline, delayed gratification, having a vision, having a purpose, striving hard. Labor, we start with having the right attitude, designing a plan, sticking to the plan, and then achieving our dreams. In exchange, we are given fame, money, power, influence, and access. With all of those, we go into the marketplace to exchange what we now have based on the characteristics that we have acquired over time for the most attractive woman. Women, on the other hand, you play a different game. Your value is seen very differently from men. For most men, we start at level 0 because in the dating marketplace, you can't pay the bills with looks if you are a man. You can't pay the bills with having great words, speaking like a gentleman. After sex, the bill still has to come. So we have to go out and make ourselves valuable in exchange for something that serves as a currency of exchange. Women, on the other hand, you play a very different game. because inherent in you as individuals is something that you have which we want. What you have, although in the artificial marketplace, some of it can be acquired. There are limitations to what you can acquire. And let me be specific. In the dating marketplace, men primarily care about a woman's beauty, her looks, and how attractive she is. We put that into what we call a bucket. The bucket is named your sexual marketplace value, SMV. We look at other things, not just your face, your height, your weight, your size, your facial features, your hair, the thickness. All of those features are put into this bucket and you're given a score because in life you stand amongst other women and therefore your value is determined on a relative basis. In addition to that, all of what makes you attractive has an intrinsic connection with your age. The younger you are, the more attractive you, all things considered, would be. So youth and age plays a part because that also connects to a second bucket, which is your reproductive fertility value, your ability to reproduce. The younger you are, the higher your score. A woman who is between 18 and 35 has all have higher scores than a woman who is 40 to 45. With all of that, what you find is that nature has gifted you, the woman, with everything you need to be valuable. And therefore, with the exception of plastic surgeries and enhancements and makeup, your value is intrinsic to who you are, which is what you have as a currency of exchange. What this means simply is, as a man, if I exchange what I have acquired in whatever currency, society does not look down on me because I have to go out, make myself valuable, acquire such traits, labor with such traits, achieve success, receive the currency of exchange, and then bring the currency of exchange to the marketplace. As a woman, you're born with your currency of exchange. Your beauty, your youth, your fertility is all part of your intrinsic makeup. Therefore, society and the way the rules of the game is set, because it's been gifted to you, is not perceived as having the same value as someone who has gone out and labored to acquire a similar currency of exchange. Now, we know this very well when we look at friends who have worked hard, who started from nothing, who've had to learn, study, practice, teach to become successful. And when we compare them to other friends of ours who have been born into wealth, who have wealthy parents, who've received what I call hand-ups and handouts, we don't see both parties as being equal. The ones who worked hard to get there, we esteem much higher than those who simply receive what they have as gifts. That same concept applies in sexual relationships. So we come back to what we started today's session with, which is sexual exclusivity and body count. When a woman exchanges what she has, which is her value, her assets, in exchange, and she does so very freely, without qualification and without due consideration, and without any form of discrimination, men view such said women as unwise, not deserving, and therefore one not to be taken seriously. Now let me make one clarification. All of such feelings only apply in the second marketplace, which is the relationship, the marriage, the cohabitation, the partnership marketplace. In the dating marketplace, men do not care about a woman's body count, because what we're looking for primarily is access. The higher your body count, the more we believe that your asking price is so low and we have to pay almost nothing. And if what we're looking for is simply access to sex, but we do not intend to retain you for longer than it takes to lay with you, then we don't care about your body count. Now, we can do that simply because of the technologies we have these days. One of such technologies is protection, is sexual protection. We can use some form of birth control method, some form of method for protecting us from sexually transmitted diseases, to ensure that the consequences of being with you, though you be promiscuous or though you be on and non-selective, because of the protection we have through technology, we can be protected from making mistakes. If we did not have all of these technologies, then men will care just as much about your promiscuity or your body count in the dating marketplace as we do in the marriage marketplace. So the same technologies that have come to enhance and help also hinder. In the dating marketplace, if you are a woman, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to a man. In the relationship marketplace, this is where the rules are interpreted slightly different by men. And the primary reason is because most men who go into relationships want one of three things. Number one, they want a family. Number two, they want serenity in their lives, and that means they want peace. And that also means they want respect. A woman who is sexually exclusive to them is a gift she gives to him, whereby she doesn't embarrass him, whereby she's not a talk about town. If I walk into a bar with you, I don't want everyone who is a man in the bar to have stories about you or to have videos and photographs of your naked self. It makes me feel as though I married a whore. That is the dating marketplace, the relationship marketplace. So it's important. The third thing we want is we want to ensure that our lineage carries on. So you're fertile, but you're not fertile for everyone, number two. And even more importantly, that you're able to script my lineage, especially because we die before you. And so women serve as scribes, and they transmit and tell the stories of the generations. And a woman who has had too many comminglings, who is equally yoked with so many partners, is difficult to pair bond with for the long term, and certainly comes with certain baggages. That is the only reason why men care. For most men, if we were oblivious to a woman's sexual past, ignorance becomes bliss. It's the knowing that causes the irritations. So, let me summarize and say this. A woman's body count matters, but it doesn't matter as much as you might think. The key question is to ask, what marketplace am I playing this game in? And do I intend to transition from one marketplace to the other? The answer will be up to you to decide. whatever decision you make, it's important to understand that men always value exclusivity. It's a prize which we hold in high esteem. It's a sacrifice that you, the woman, would have to make.